Hey everyone, tonight we're diving into a story that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about second chances, revenge, and the power of never giving up. This isn't your typical comeback story. In fact, it's a journey of unexpected triumph, fueled by betrayal, resilience, and something far greater than just redemption. I want you to imagine something for a second. You're standing in front of your own home in your best Sunday dress, holding 2 suitcases and a cardboard box. It's raining, the drops hitting the ground with a soft, steady rhythm. Your son, the one you raised through thick and thin, the one you carried on your shoulders when life was tough, is locking the door behind you. And he's not just closing the door to the house. He's closing the door to your life, your family, your everything. It's all gone in an instant. That was me. My name is Clara Matthews. And the day my son Nathan and his wife Rebecca threw me out of their house, I knew my life was about to change. I didn't know how exactly, but I knew something bigger was waiting on the other side. You see, Nathan and Rebecca thought they had me all figured out. They thought I'd fall apart, that I'd be broken forever. They thought I was a burden, just a woman in her 60s too set in my ways to adapt to their perfect little world. But what they didn't know was that the moment they locked me out, they'd ignited a fire in me that they'd never be able to put out. It was October 20th, 2015, the day I found myself standing in front of my son's house with no place to go, no plan, and no idea what the future held. 3 months earlier, I had been living with Nathan and Rebecca after my husband Frank passed away. They invited me to stay while I figured things out, and I thought I was helping them out too, taking care of their 2 young children and contributing whatever I could to ease their burden. But somehow, somewhere along the way, I became a problem. "Clara, we need to talk," Nathan had said to me that morning, his voice cold, distant, like I wasn't his mother at all. I looked at him, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, his arms crossed. Rebecca was standing behind him, her expression one I had grown to despise, smug, confident, almost like she owned the conversation. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but inside I could feel a pit forming in my stomach. This wasn't how family was supposed to work. This wasn't how it was supposed to feel. Rebecca spoke next. "This situation isn't working anymore, Clara. The kids are getting confused about who's in charge. You're too set in your ways." Her words stung sharp like a knife, and then she added, as if it were a favor, "You need to figure out where you're going. We can't keep doing this." I was silent for a moment, too shocked to say anything. The last 3 months I had poured every bit of myself into helping them. I had spent mornings making breakfast for the kids, afternoons tutoring them, and evenings watching them while Nathan and Rebecca went about their lives. But apparently none of that mattered now. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked softly, almost afraid to hear the answer. I didn't know how I could survive if they sent me away. Rebecca's face was impassive, her words cutting through the air like a cold wind. "That's not our problem anymore," she said, shrugging. "You're a grown woman. Figure it out." I stood there dumbfounded, unable to grasp what was happening. I had spent years raising Nathan, making sacrifices, loving him unconditionally. And this is how I was being repaid. 20 minutes later, my life was packed into 2 suitcases and a cardboard box. No goodbyes, no understanding, just the sound of Nathan locking the door behind me. My son, my flesh and blood, throwing me away like I was yesterday's trash. The taxi came and I climbed into it without looking back. I didn't have the strength to. I felt broken, discarded, alone. But here's the thing, they underestimated me. They thought they'd stripped me of everything, but what they didn't realize was that I wasn't just losing my home. I was losing my old life. And that's when I began to realize that everything I had thought I knew was about to be upended. The universe had given me a blank slate. It was time to rewrite my story. The next few weeks were tough. I moved into a small, rundown motel off Route 4, barely able to afford the $45 a night rate. The room was as dreary as it sounded small, cramped and smelling faintly of bleach and old carpets. But it was mine, and in that moment, that was all I could ask for. I'd never been one to ask for help, but I was forced to now. I spent my days at the local library sitting at the computers, typing out resumes, looking for anything I could do to support myself. But finding a job at 60 wasn't easy. Most companies weren't exactly lining up to hire someone my age. Still, I refused to let that discourage me. And then it happened. I walked into a small garden center Mitchell's nursery on a whim. I needed a job, any job. I had no experience in gardening or plants, but something told me this was where I needed to be. I met Sarah Mitchell, the owner who gave me a chance part-time minimum wage, but a chance. At first, I did the usual work, sweeping floors, stocking shelves, and watering plants. But there was something about the way Sarah ran her business that caught my eye. The whole operation was chaotic. The inventory system was outdated. Plants were going to waste unsold and unaccounted for, simply thrown out when the season ended. That's when it hit me. I'd always been good at finding value in things others discarded. What if I could take these plants, these so-called dead plants, and bring them back to life? I started experimenting in my spare time, rescuing plants that seemed beyond saving, nursing them back to health. It wasn't long before I realized that I had a natural talent for plant rehabilitation, and that my friends was the beginning of my journey to a life I never expected. I wasn't just a woman living in a motel anymore. I was someone with a plan, someone with a purpose. It wasn't long before I realized that this little side project wasn't just a distraction from my life's mess, it was my future. The first few weeks at Mitchell's nursery were a blur of water soil and trial and error. I wasn't sure what I was doing, but I was determined to figure it out. Every evening after my shift, I'd stay late in the garden center, working on the plants that had been cast aside, trying to revive them. There was something incredibly satisfying about breathing new life into something so overlooked, something that everyone else thought was worthless. It wasn't easy. A lot of plants died, but there were a few that started to thrive. Green shoots sprouted, leaves unfurled, and flowers bloomed where there had been nothing but decay. Each success felt like a personal victory, a reminder that even the most broken things could be fixed with a little care and patience. I kept these experiments to myself at first. I didn't want to get anyone's hopes up, and I didn't want to look like some crazy woman talking about plant miracles. But by the end of my first month, I had managed to revive about 30 plants. They weren't perfect, but they were alive, and I was proud of them. When Sarah saw them, she was skeptical at first. "You sure these are ready for sale?" she asked, inspecting the plants with a furrowed brow. "I'm sure," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just give them a chance." She reluctantly agreed to let me sell them. The next day, she sold out every single one of them. It wasn't a huge profit, but it was something. More importantly, it was validation. I wasn't just playing with plants, I was creating value, bringing something back to life that others had given up on. And in doing so, I was starting to bring myself back to life as well. Over the next few months, I got better at it. I started reading up on plant care, learning everything I could from books, videos, and from Sarah. My passion for the work grew, and so did my confidence. By the time winter came around, I had turned my tiny apartment into a makeshift greenhouse. It was cramped, but it was mine. And slowly, my humble operation started to take shape. I filled every corner of my apartment with plants, pots, and soil. It was as if the apartment was growing as much as I was. But as with any new venture, I soon realized I needed more than just a passion for plants. I needed a plan. I needed to think bigger. My tiny apartment operation couldn't support the demand that was building. There were more and more people coming to Mitchell's nursery asking for my rehabilitated plants, and Sarah was starting to ask if I could take on more. I was overwhelmed, but excited. This was something real. This was my future. It was during this time that I met Olivia Simmons. She was a business consultant, sharp no nonsense, and incredibly successful. She came into the nursery one afternoon to buy some plants for her garden, and we started talking. The conversation quickly turned to my plant work, and she was fascinated by the concept of rehabilitating plants instead of letting them die and get thrown away. "You have a real talent for this," Olivia said, her eyes narrowing in thought. "You could turn this into a business." At first, I thought she was just being kind. I had no experience running a business, and honestly, I wasn't sure I was cut out for it. But Olivia didn't take no for an answer. She pushed me to think bigger, to see the potential in my work that I couldn't yet see. "You're not just saving plants," she explained. "You're solving a problem. There are entire businesses out there throwing away perfectly good plants every season. You can be the one to fix that." I wasn't sure what I was doing, but I was listening. The idea of turning my plant hobby into a business began to take root in my mind. Olivia helped me create a basic business plan. She guided me through the process of registering my company Greenhaven Plant Recovery and getting everything set up legally. It felt like the first real step in taking control of my life after all those years of feeling powerless. In the beginning, I was still working part-time at the nursery, managing my small plant rehabilitation operation from my apartment. But slowly, I started to see the fruits of my labor. Greenhaven became a real business. Sarah helped me by giving me access to plants that couldn't be sold, and I started distributing them to other garden centers in the area. The profits were modest at first, but they were growing steadily. It wasn't glamorous. I wasn't living in a mansion, and I wasn't rolling in money. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was building something that was entirely my own, something that couldn't be taken away from me. As my business grew, I began to realize that I wasn't just saving plants. I was saving myself too. Each plant that I brought back to life was a reminder that I could overcome whatever life threw at me. When people said I was too old, too broken, too insignificant to succeed, I proved them wrong one plant at a time. But even as I found success, I knew it wasn't going to be easy. This was just the beginning. There were more challenges ahead, and they were bigger than I had ever imagined. But I was ready. I wasn't going to stop. Not after everything I had gone through. Not after everything I had overcome. By the time spring rolled around Greenhaven, plant recovery had expanded beyond my tiny apartment. I'd hired a few part-time helpers, mostly people from the local community, who shared my love for plants and my passion for saving them from the landfill. We had a small team, but we were working miracles, at least that's what I told myself every morning as I walked into the makeshift office I'd set up in the corner of my living room. The nursery was buzzing. I had managed to secure contracts with local garden centers, and Sarah had begun to refer me to other businesses that were looking for ways to reduce waste. The plant rehabilitation process was something people hadn't really considered before. I wasn't just selling dead plants to be revived. I was offering a service that could help companies cut down on their losses. This was something real, and the more I saw it working, the more excited I became. But even with the business growing, I knew I couldn't keep running it out of my apartment. The plants were starting to take over every inch of available space. I could barely walk through the hallway without tripping over pots or stepping on a stray cactus. And the noise, the sound of the air conditioning unit running nonstop, the hum of the plant lights, and the constant rustling of leaves in the wind made it feel like I was living in the middle of a rainforest. One afternoon, while meeting Olivia for coffee, I finally admitted to myself that it was time to take the next step. "Olivia," I said, stirring my coffee slowly. "I need more space. This operation is outgrowing my apartment, and I need a real facility somewhere I can expand and store more plants, somewhere I can scale up this business." Olivia didn't hesitate. She nodded slowly, as if she had been waiting for me to say those words. "You've got a good thing here, Clara. You know that, right?" She leaned forward. "I can help you with the logistics, and we can find you a small warehouse. It's the next logical step. The idea of getting a warehouse terrified me. It wasn't just about money. It was about commitment. It was about taking this thing that started as a small, humble project and turning it into something bigger than I had ever imagined. But Olivia's confidence in me made me feel like I could do it. She'd helped me through so much already, and now she was offering me the kind of support I'd never had before. We spent the next few weeks hunting for a space. It wasn't easy. Real estate prices were high, and the few warehouses I could afford were either too small or too run down. I wanted something that reflected the progress I had made, a space that could give my business the room it needed to grow, but also a place where I could feel proud of the work we were doing. I wasn't looking for just a storage unit, I was looking for a future. And then I found it. The place was on the outskirts of town, a little out of the way, but still accessible. It was a 5,000 square foot warehouse, not too fancy, but perfect for what I needed. It had high ceilings, plenty of windows for natural light, and enough space for plants to breathe. The rent was reasonable, and after negotiating a deal with the landlord, I signed the lease. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of moving, organizing, and setting up the new space. The moment I stepped inside that empty warehouse, it felt like I was stepping into a new life. The possibilities felt endless. I could see the rows of plants lining the walls, the shelves filled with tools and supplies, and the workspace where my team would gather every morning to breathe life into the next batch of neglected plants. And so Green Haven Plant Recovery moved into its new home. But as much as it was a victory for the business, it was also a turning point for me personally. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was truly in control of my future. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building something, creating something that mattered. I was living with purpose. As the weeks passed, the business grew faster than I could have imagined. More garden centers signed on, and I started to get calls from companies in nearby towns. It wasn't just about bringing plants back to life anymore. It was about creating a sustainable, profitable solution for businesses that were wasting valuable resources. Green Haven Plant Recovery wasn't just a plant rehabilitation service. It was a solution to an industry-wide problem. The satisfaction of seeing it all come together was overwhelming. I spent my days managing the warehouse, overseeing plant operations, and meeting with clients. The work was hard, but it was fulfilling in a way I never thought possible. I felt like I was finally where I belonged, no longer the woman discarded by her family, but a woman who had built something from nothing. One day, as I was going over inventory, I received an unexpected call. It was from a woman named Eleanor Rodriguez, the head of the Small Business Development Center in town. I had heard of her through Olivia. She was known for helping small businesses expand and succeed. "Clara, I've been following your business," Eleanor said, "and I have to say I'm impressed. What you're doing is incredible, and I think it's time for you to take this to the next level." I wasn't sure what she meant by that, but I listened intently. Eleanor explained that she wanted to help me expand Green Haven beyond just the local area. "You've got the potential to turn this into something nationwide," she said. "I can help you with a business plan, marketing strategies, and even securing funding for larger-scale operations. Let's get this off the ground and make it a household name." The idea of going national was both thrilling and terrifying. But at that moment, I realized something. The woman who had once been kicked out of her son's house with nothing but 2 suitcases and a cardboard box had somehow made it this far. I wasn't going to stop now. I had a chance to make Green Haven a business that could help people make money and change the way the world thought about waste. I agreed to work with Eleanor, and we started developing a comprehensive plan for the next phase of Green Haven. It was going to take time, effort, and a lot of resources, but it was a challenge I was ready for. And so, my journey continued. From the motel room to a warehouse, from a small side project to a nationwide business, I could see that nothing, absolutely nothing, was impossible. I had taken control of my destiny, and there was no turning back now. By the time we hit the 6-month mark of working with Eleanor, Green Haven Plant Recovery was on the cusp of something incredible. The plans we had been putting together were starting to feel real. No longer was I a small operation run from a cramped apartment. I was on the verge of scaling up, expanding beyond my wildest dreams. With Eleanor's help, I was learning about business at a pace I never imagined I'd be capable of. She pushed me, challenged me, and more importantly, believed in me when I didn't always believe in myself. It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. There were plenty of moments when the idea of taking Greenhaven national felt like trying to build a skyscraper with a bucket of sand. The logistics were overwhelming, figuring out supply chains, hiring the right people, negotiating contracts. But for every setback, there was an opportunity. I started to see how much potential the business had, and it made the late nights and the stress worthwhile. The first major turning point came when we secured our first major contract outside of town. A chain of garden centers in nearby cities expressed interest in using our plant rehabilitation services, and they were willing to pay for it. It wasn't a huge contract, but it was a huge win. This was the moment I realized that Greenhaven wasn't just a passion project anymore. It was a legitimate business, and it was becoming something bigger than I ever thought possible. With the new contract came new challenges. The warehouse was bursting at the seams with plants, and I knew we had to keep up with the increased demand. I brought on more employees to help with the workload. I needed people who shared my vision and my drive to make the business grow. The team I started building wasn't just a group of employees, they were people who believed in what we were doing. They were all as invested in the success of Greenhaven as I was, and that made all the difference. There was one person in particular who stood out: Sarah, the owner of the nursery where I had first worked. When I started Greenhaven, Sarah had been a mentor of sorts, teaching me the ropes and giving me the chance to prove myself. But now, things had changed. As Greenhaven started to grow, Sarah's own nursery was struggling. She had been hit hard by the competition, and despite her best efforts, she couldn't keep up. One afternoon, as I was working late in the warehouse, Sarah came to visit. Her usual confidence was replaced by a quiet sadness, something I hadn't seen in her before. "Clara," she said, hesitating, "I don't know what I'm going to do. My nursery is sinking, and I can't turn it around. I see what you're doing with Greenhaven, and I'm proud of you. But I don't know if I can keep going." I had known this moment was coming. I knew that Sarah's nursery was struggling. I also knew that I owed a lot of my success to her. But I didn't expect the weight of her words to hit me so hard. It was like being slapped in the face with a reality I wasn't ready to face. But as I looked at her, I realized I had something that she didn't: momentum. Greenhaven was on the rise, and I had the resources to help her. I wasn't just going to watch her lose everything. This wasn't about business rivalry or competition. This was about helping a friend who had helped me when I was at my lowest. "Sarah," I said softly, "I'm not going to let you fail. I know this business inside and out, and I think we can turn things around. I can help you with some of your problems. You've been a part of my journey, and now it's my turn to help you." She looked at me, eyes wide with disbelief. "You'd do that?" "I wouldn't be where I am without you," I replied. "You've got a lot of experience, and I've got the business sense. Together, we can make this work." It wasn't an easy decision, but I offered to buy out part of Sarah's nursery and bring it under the Greenhaven umbrella. It would be a huge investment for me, but I believed in the potential. More than that, I believed in Sarah. If I could help her turn things around, it would be a win for both of us. To my surprise, she agreed. We spent the next few months integrating her nursery into my operations. It wasn't just a business move, it was a partnership, a chance to help someone who had helped me when I had nothing. As we grew, I started seeing the fruits of our labor. Greenhaven wasn't just about saving plants anymore. It was about creating a network of people who believed in something bigger than themselves. We were making a difference in the industry, helping businesses reduce waste while creating a sustainable solution. I couldn't help but feel proud of what we had accomplished. But I also knew that I wasn't done yet. I wasn't just going to stop here and be content with what we had built. Greenhaven had the potential to be more than just a local operation. It could go national. And once we were ready, I knew that I wanted to take it even further. As the days went on, I realized that the person who had been thrown out of her son's house with nothing was no longer that woman. The Clara who had been discarded like yesterday's garbage was gone. I had rebuilt myself piece by piece, just like the plants I had saved. But what truly amazed me was that I was doing more than just building a business. I was changing the way people saw me and changing the way I saw myself. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And Nathan and Rebecca, they had no idea what was coming. They thought they had thrown me away for good. But what they didn't know was that they had just made me stronger, more determined, and more successful than they could ever imagine. As Greenhaven plant recovery continued to grow, so did the stakes. I had once dreamed of a modest operation, something small and manageable, just enough to get by. But now, with the integration of Sarah's nursery new contracts pouring in from garden centers across the state and a growing team of employees, I knew I was on the verge of something big. In the back of my mind, I had always imagined that someday I might be able to expand even further nationwide, perhaps even global. But I couldn't ignore the sense of responsibility that came with the growth. I had a real business now, not just a passion project. The pressure started mounting. There were days when the to-do list seemed endless, when the emails piled up and the phone calls were relentless. Yet every time I felt overwhelmed, I would stop for a moment and remind myself how far I had come. From that motel room with barely enough money to pay for a taxi ride to a thriving business that was not only turning a profit, but solving a real problem in the horticulture industry. I wasn't just fixing broken plants anymore. I was fixing broken systems, and that was no small feat. But there was one thing I hadn't expected. The more successful I became, the more I began to feel the old wounds reopening. It had been years since Nathan and Rebecca had thrown me out, but the pain of their rejection still lingered. It wasn't the material things that hurt the most. It was the feeling of being discarded by the people I loved most. As my business grew, so did the temptation to reach out to them to show them that I had made something of myself. But deep down, I knew the truth: they didn't deserve to share in my success. They hadn't earned that right. Still, I couldn't ignore the little voice in my head that asked, what if they came back? What if they apologized? The thought made me uneasy, but it didn't stop me from imagining it. The idea of seeing Nathan and Rebecca again, of confronting them with everything I had accomplished, was both thrilling and terrifying. I didn't know if I was ready for that kind of confrontation, but I knew one thing for sure: I was no longer the woman they had tossed aside. One day, I was working late in the office when I received a message that would change everything. It was from Nathan. The message was short, just a few lines, but it was enough to make my heart skip a beat. Clara, I know it's been a long time. I've been thinking about everything, and I want to apologize for what happened all those years ago. I was wrong, and I know I hurt you. If you're open to it, I'd like to talk. Please give me a chance to make things right. I stared at the screen, unsure of how to respond. For a moment, I felt a surge of anger. How dare he, after everything he had done, how could he just waltz back into my life like nothing had happened? The thought of him waltzing back into my world made my blood boil. And yet, part of me couldn't help but wonder what he wanted from me. Did he want to see me fail? Or was this a genuine attempt at reconciliation? For days, I debated whether or not to reply. I went back and forth making lists of reasons why I should, then crossing them out. The pain was still too fresh. There were too many unanswered questions, too many years of silence. But as much as I wanted to ignore him and continue on with my life, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was my opportunity for closure. If nothing else, I owed it to myself to hear him out. I wasn't doing it for him, I was doing it for me. So I decided to respond. "We can talk?" I wrote. "But know this, Nathan, I'm not the same person you threw out all those years ago. I've worked hard for everything I have, and I won't let you or anyone else take that away from me." The message was sent. A few days later, Nathan arrived at the warehouse. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to back down. When I saw him standing in front of me looking older and smaller than I remembered, I felt an unexpected rush of emotions. For years, I had wondered what it would feel like to confront him, to look him in the eye, and finally say everything I'd been holding in. But now, standing there in front of him, I didn't feel anger. I felt indifferent. "Nathan," I said, my voice steady, "you wanted to talk. Here we are." He nodded, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his jacket. "Clara, I don't know where to start. I've thought about this moment for so long. I'm sorry for everything. The way I treated you. The way I just—" He trailed off, his voice cracking. I stood silent for a moment, waiting for him to continue. But nothing more came. No big emotional apology, no deep understanding of how his actions had impacted me. I had expected some kind of grand gesture, but instead, I got this: a man who, after all these years, still couldn't find the words to truly make things right. I spent a long time thinking about this. I finally said, my voice colder than I intended. And I realized something important. I don't need you to apologize. I don't need anything from you anymore. He looked at me, his face showing a mixture of surprise and regret. "Clara, I don't expect you to forgive me, but—" "Forgiveness doesn't change what happened," I interrupted. "You did what you did, and I did what I did. I moved on, and I'm not asking you to understand that. But I'm not going to let you back into my life, not like this." His face fell. "I understand. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and if there's anything I can do—" "No," I said firmly. "You've done enough." And just like that, the past was over. The closure I had longed for was no longer something I needed. I had forgiven him, not because he deserved it, but because I had learned the one thing I needed to know: I could stand on my own. I didn't need anyone's approval, and I didn't need anyone's apology. I turned away from him and walked back into the warehouse, my heart light and my mind clear. I had built this life with my own hands, and I was no longer bound by anyone else's expectations. As I looked around the bustling warehouse with my team working hard, I felt a sense of pride that was deeper than anything I had ever experienced. This was my empire now. I had fought for it. I had bled for it. And no one was going to take it away from me. Green Haven wasn't just a business, it was my legacy. And it was only just beginning. The days following Nathan's visit were oddly peaceful. I had expected the encounter to leave me feeling unsettled, maybe even shaken. But instead, it brought a sense of finality that I didn't realize I was missing. I had confronted the past head-on, and I had let it go. Now, it was time to focus on the future. Green Haven was growing faster than I had imagined. The contracts kept coming in, and my reputation in the industry had started to solidify. Word of mouth had spread far beyond my initial reach. People were beginning to recognize that I wasn't just some woman with a passion for plants. I was running a business that solved real problems. From a small operation in my apartment, to a warehouse bursting with plants, to working with garden centers across multiple states, everything was moving in the right direction. As much as I had feared success at the beginning now, it was clear that success was the only option. I had started small, but it was no longer just about me and my little team. This was bigger. I was changing the way businesses handled waste. I was proving that old things, be it plants or people, could be revived given the right attention and care. But with success came challenges. I started facing questions I hadn't considered. How could I manage expansion without losing the personal touch that had made Greenhaven special? How could I scale without compromising the values I had fought so hard to build? These weren't just business questions, they were personal questions. I had spent so many years being discarded by the people I loved. Now I was terrified of doing the same thing to my employees, to my clients, to the very thing I had worked so hard to create. The answer came one night while I was walking through the warehouse. The workday was over, and the place was quiet. I stood there surrounded by rows of thriving plants, all in various stages of rehabilitation, each one a small victory. It hit me then, Greenhaven wasn't just about plants. It was about people. It was about nurturing what others had overlooked and giving it a second chance. The business had become a metaphor for my own life. Every time I saved a plant, I was saving myself. Every new contract, every success was my way of proving that the people who discarded me were wrong. I had built something from the ground up, something that mattered, but it was time to take it even further. I had worked tirelessly for years to get to this point. Now it was time to make Greenhaven a name people knew across the country, maybe even globally. This wasn't just a business to me anymore. It was a legacy, something I could leave behind that would have a lasting impact. If there was one thing I had learned, it was that I could turn anything into something worthwhile, anything. I decided it was time to start franchising. The thought was terrifying, but exhilarating. Franchising would allow me to share my methods, my process with other people who shared my passion. It was a chance to scale Greenhaven while maintaining the integrity of what we were doing. It would be a way for other entrepreneurs to build something that mattered just as I had. But it would require a level of trust, of letting go, that I wasn't sure I was ready for. Olivia, as always, was my sounding board. "Clara, you've built this from the ground up," she said one afternoon, looking over my business plan. "You've proven you can handle growth, but you can't do it alone. This is the next step. You're ready." I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I didn't have the luxury of waiting for the perfect moment. So I took a deep breath and dove in. We started putting together a comprehensive franchise model, something that would allow new owners to replicate Greenhaven's success in their own areas. It wasn't going to be easy. Franchising required legal paperwork, marketing plans, training programs. Everything had to be buttoned up tight. I knew that the business would grow exponentially, but I had to be sure that the quality remained high and the values stayed intact. I didn't want to end up like the people who had discarded me, focused only on profit without regard for the people and processes that had gotten me to where I was. The process was long and grueling. There were late nights spent working on documents, meetings with legal teams, and a whole lot of paperwork. But slowly, step by step, the pieces began to fall into place. As the months went by, I started receiving inquiries from potential franchisees, people who were just as passionate about sustainability as I was, people who wanted to create their own businesses and make a real difference. One of the first inquiries came from a woman named Paula Williams, a former corporate executive who had left her job to pursue her passion for plants. Paula was excited about Greenhaven's mission, and after meeting her in person, I could tell she was the right fit for the franchise. She had the right values, the right attitude, and the drive to succeed. It wasn't just about the money for her, it was about doing something that mattered. It wasn't long before we had signed the first franchise agreement. Paula's location opened in the spring of the following year, and it was a huge success. She had taken everything I taught her and made it her own. The plants were thriving, the customers were happy, and Greenhaven's reputation continued to grow. With the first franchise under my belt, the floodgates opened. More people reached out. The Greenhaven brand was spreading across the country, one franchise at a time. We had expanded into 3 more states in just 2 years. What started as a small operation in a cramped apartment had turned into a nationwide business. I wasn't just in the plant business anymore. I was in the business of transformation. I had transformed my own life, and now I was helping others transform theirs. It felt good. Better than good. But despite all the growth, I never lost sight of what mattered most to me, the plants. Each time I visited a new franchise, I was reminded of how far we had come. It was like watching a child grow into an adult. It was humbling. And I realized that the success wasn't in the money or even the size of the business. It was in the impact we were having, the difference we were making, and the lives we were touching along the way. And then came the big test. Could I balance it all? Could I manage a growing business while keeping true to my values? Could I scale Green Haven without losing the personal touch that had made it successful in the first place? I didn't have all the answers. But what I did know was this: I wasn't the same woman I had been when I first started. I was stronger, more confident, and more determined. I had faced every challenge head-on, and I had come out the other side not just surviving, but thriving. And I knew that no matter what happened next, Green Haven would always be mine. Because this was my legacy. This was my second chance, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it away from me. As Green Haven continued its expansion, I found myself facing a new set of challenges. The whirlwind of growth, while exciting, began to test my limits. The business was no longer just about rehabilitating plants, it was about managing a growing empire. And let me tell you, managing an empire requires a level of focus and energy I hadn't anticipated. The first few months after the franchising had kicked off were a blur. Every time I turned around, there was another email, another phone call, another problem to solve. A shipment of plants got delayed. A franchisee had issues with their local suppliers. Someone needed training on the rehab process. And that was on top of running the flagship warehouse where it all began. There were days when I barely had time to breathe, let alone enjoy the success I had fought so hard to achieve. But as overwhelming as it was, I found a rhythm. Every morning, I would wake up early, sip my coffee, while overlooking the sprawling grounds of the Millbrook Heights estate I had bought a few years ago, and prepare myself for whatever the day would bring. It had taken me a long time to get here, but now every day was a new opportunity to prove that I could handle it all. At the heart of everything was my team people I had handpicked for their skills, their passion, and their commitment. I made it a point to always stay involved, whether it was personally training new employees or checking in on franchise locations to make sure everything was running smoothly. It wasn't just about business, it was about making sure that every person who worked for Green Haven felt like they were part of something bigger than themselves. After all, this wasn't just about plants. This was about changing lives. And then there was Eleanor. I had come to rely on her more than anyone else in the company. She wasn't just a consultant, she had become a business partner, and in many ways, a close friend. Every time I doubted myself, she was there with a solution, or a fresh perspective. "You've built this from the ground up," she would remind me. "You've already proven you can do this. The rest is just details." It was that reminder that kept me going. The rest was just details. But there was one thing: I hadn't fully prepared for the pressure of being successful. It sounds strange, right? After all, who wouldn't want success? But I quickly learned that success brings its own unique set of challenges. Expectations grew both from my team and from myself. I started to feel the weight of responsibility more than I ever had before. With every new location, every new franchise came the expectation that I could replicate the success of the first warehouse. People trusted me, believed in me, and I couldn't afford to let them down. But what I didn't anticipate was how the pressure would start affecting my health. It started as a mild headache here and there, But over time, it escalated into something more serious. I was getting fatigued more easily, and my sleep was constantly interrupted by thoughts of the business. One night, after a particularly long week, I found myself in a meeting with a new franchisee, barely able to keep my eyes open. I couldn't concentrate, and my usual sharpness was clouded by exhaustion. That was when I realized something important. I couldn't keep running at full speed forever. If I was going to maintain the success of Greenhaven and my own well-being, I had to learn to delegate. I had to trust that my team and my franchisees could carry the business forward without me being involved in every little detail. It was a hard lesson to learn. For so long, I had prided myself on doing everything myself. I had built Greenhaven from the ground up, and I thought that if I wasn't there, overseeing every aspect, everything would fall apart. But I was wrong. The people I had brought into this business were capable. They were smart-driven and passionate about what we were doing. They didn't need me to micromanage them. They needed me to lead them. So I began the process of stepping back. It wasn't easy at first, but slowly I started to give my team more responsibility. I handed over the reins of daily operations to Sarah, who had proven herself time and again, and I focused on the bigger picture, expanding Greenhaven, maintaining its core values, and continuing to help others see the potential in things that others had overlooked. The more I stepped back, the more I realized something I had built Greenhaven to be bigger than me. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about creating a sustainable business that could continue to grow and thrive without my constant presence. I didn't need to do it all. What mattered was that I had created something that could stand on its own, something that could make a difference long after I was gone. And as the business grew, I started to take better care of myself. I took weekends off. I took up yoga, something I never would have considered before. And I made time for the things that mattered: my friends, my family, or at least the family I still had, and most importantly, myself. I had spent so many years focused on survival, on proving people wrong, that I had forgotten how to truly live. But now, with Greenhaven thriving and my personal life finally coming into balance, I was starting to remember what it felt like to be happy. I had worked hard for everything I had. But now, I realized something even more important. I deserved it. I deserved the peace that had come with my success. I deserved the freedom to enjoy the fruits of my labor. And no one, not even Nathan or Rebecca, could take that away from me. One afternoon, as I sat in my office overlooking the expansive fields surrounding the warehouse, I realized that I had finally come full circle. This wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about who I had become in the process. I had learned that I could create something beautiful from nothing, that I could take the scraps of life and turn them into something extraordinary. And in doing so, I had transformed not just my own life, but the lives of others too. I wasn't just a woman who had been thrown out by her family. I was a woman who had built an empire from the ground up. And I was proud of it. Greenhaven wasn't just a business. It was a testament to the power of second chances. It was proof that no matter how old you are, no matter how many people have told you that you're done, you can always start over. You can always reinvent yourself. And as I watched the sun set over the fields that I now owned, I couldn't help but smile. I had come a long way. But the journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning. It had been 5 years since I started taking the reins at Greenhaven full-time. 5 years of steady growth challenges and victories small and large. But if I'm being honest with you, it didn't always feel like I was on top of the world. The highs were amazing, but the lows had a way of creeping in and reminding me just how fragile everything really was. That balance I had started to find between work and personal life was easier said than done. Sure, I was finally getting the hang of delegation, but sometimes it felt like the weight of the world was still on my shoulders. No matter how much I tried to distance myself, no matter how many systems and people I had in place to run the business, I couldn't escape the feeling that I was the one who had to hold it all together. But then one day, something changed. It was the kind of moment that shifts your perspective. A slow burn that over time turns into something unmistakable. And it happened one afternoon while I was in the middle of yet another phone call with a new franchisee who had some concerns about plant supply delays. On the other end of the line, I could hear frustration in the voice of my newest franchisee, Karen. "I just don't understand why these plants keep showing up late," she said, her voice tinged with anxiety. "You told me that once I signed the franchise agreement, I'd get all the support I needed, but it feels like I'm left to handle it all on my own." Her words struck me in a way that no one else's had before. My instinct was to brush it off, to say the things I had said before. "This is normal when you're starting a new business, or I'll make sure to follow up with our supplier." But then, as I looked around my office with its neatly organized files, my calendar filled with back-to-back meetings, and my phone lighting up with endless notifications, I suddenly understood something. Karen wasn't the only one who felt this way. I had been feeling like this for a while too. The truth was, no matter how far Greenhaven had come, there was still something missing: the personal connection. When I first started, it was all about the relationships, the way I connected with every plant, every customer, every person who walked into my life. But as the business grew, I realized I had lost that. Somewhere between the deals, the contracts, and the numbers, I had forgotten why I started Greenhaven in the first place: to help people. And not just help them succeed financially, but to create a community, a family. So that day, I made a decision. It wasn't a decision to scale back or stop growing. It was a decision to go deeper, to reconnect with the heart of Greenhaven, with the people who had helped me get here, and with the customers who believed in us. I decided to change the way we operated, starting with how I communicated with my franchisees. I realized I couldn't afford to just be a business owner anymore. I needed to be a mentor, a partner, a guide. That afternoon, I called Karen back. I could tell she was already preparing for a debate or some kind of explanation for the delays, but I wasn't interested in excuses anymore. "Karen," I said, "I know I've been hard to reach these past few months, and I'm sorry for that. I've been focusing so much on growing the business that I've lost touch with what matters. But from now on, I want you to know that you're not alone in this. I'm here for you, and I'll be involved in helping you solve these problems, not just sending emails from a distance." Her voice softened. "You really mean that?" "Absolutely," I said with conviction. "We built Greenhaven on trust and relationships. I let that slip, but I'm fixing it now. Let's start fresh." The conversation with Karen was a turning point. After that, I began calling every single franchisee and asking them how they were really doing, not just how their plants were growing or how sales were coming along, but how they were feeling about the work, about the business. It was amazing how many people opened up and shared that they too had been feeling a bit isolated, a bit disconnected from the larger mission. They had all been doing their best, but like me, they had lost sight of the bigger picture. That's when I realized something even more important: the business didn't just belong to me. It belonged to all of us. We were a community, a family of people who had come together to make Greenhaven what it was. And that meant we all needed to be more involved with each other, not just in the day-to-day operations, but in the vision. We needed to nurture the relationships we had the same way we nurtured the plants. From that moment on, I started making changes. I brought the team together for regular meetings to share ideas, discuss challenges, and celebrate wins. I created a platform where all franchisees could communicate directly with each other, exchanging advice and offering support. The relationships we built with each other became the foundation of everything Greenhaven stood for. I also took steps to ensure that every new franchisee was not only equipped with the tools to succeed, but also felt welcomed into the Greenhaven family from day one. I wanted them to know they weren't just another number on a spreadsheet. They were part of something much bigger, a movement, to change how the world saw plants and sustainability. As the weeks passed, the business started to feel different. It wasn't about being the biggest or the most profitable anymore. It was about being the best at what we did. It was about relationships, trust, and caring for the plants, the people, and the planet. That's what made Green Haven special. But there was still one thing missing, a chance to prove that this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about all of us. I decided to host our first ever Green Haven conference. It would bring together franchisees, employees, partners, and even some of our most dedicated customers. It was a chance to celebrate everything we had built and to look toward the future. I wanted everyone to see that the business wasn't just about making money, it was about making a difference. The conference was a resounding success. We shared our successes, but more importantly, we shared our challenges and learned from each other. We celebrated the people who had supported Green Haven since day one and welcomed new faces into the fold. It was a reminder of just how far we had come, not just as a business, but as a community. And as the conference came to a close, I stood on stage looking out at the faces of the people who had helped me turn my dream into a reality. It was overwhelming. These weren't just employees or business partners. They were people who had believed in something bigger than themselves, who had stuck with me through the ups and downs. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't alone. I was part of something bigger, too. It wasn't just about plants or profits. It was about people. I had built Green Haven from nothing, but now it was more than just my business. It was all of ours, and that was the most beautiful thing of all. By the time Green Haven celebrated its 5th anniversary, I had reached a place in my life that I hadn't thought possible when I first started. I was no longer the person who had been thrown out by her own family. I wasn't the woman who had struggled alone in a motel room. I was a businesswoman, yes, but more than that, I was someone who had reclaimed her life, her confidence, and her worth. It wasn't all easy, of course. The deeper I got into running a large-scale operation, the more I had to come to terms with the fact that running a business this big wasn't the same as running a small, hands-on operation. There were moments of doubt, moments where I questioned whether I had the strength to keep everything going. And even though I had trusted my team and had delegated more responsibility to them, the weight of leadership was something that could never be entirely shared. One day, as I sat in my office reviewing financial reports and making notes about upcoming franchise expansions, I received an email that I wasn't expecting. The subject line read, "Urgent request for assistance." It was from Rebecca. Yes, my ex-daughter-in-law, the same woman who had tossed me out like a piece of trash 6 years ago. I stared at the email for a few moments, unsure of how to respond. The message itself was short, not much more than a cry for help. "Maggie, I don't know who else to turn to. James lost his job again. The mortgage is overdue. We need help. Please, just this once." For a moment, I felt like I had been hit with a brick. My heart raced, but not out of sympathy. No, this wasn't about forgiveness. This wasn't about being the good mother or the selfless grandmother. I had been through too much to fall for that again. This was about something different. It was about power, the kind of power I had earned through my own blood, sweat, and tears. I sat there looking at the email for what seemed like an eternity. I could have ignored it. I could have told her I was too busy, that I had moved on. But I couldn't help myself. There was something strangely satisfying about the idea of responding, of putting everything in perspective. After what felt like an eternity, I typed a response. "Rebecca, I'm sorry to hear about James. I'm sure things are tough for him right now. But I must be clear, helping you is not an option. What I suggest is this: you and James take responsibility for your choices. You didn't take responsibility for me 6 years ago, so don't expect me to carry the weight of your mistakes now. I paused after I hit send, the finality of my words settling in. I had no idea what kind of reaction they would provoke, but I felt a strange sense of peace. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. But I was resolute. Over the next few days, the email went unanswered, but I felt a strange calm. It wasn't as if I was trying to get revenge, it was more about standing up for myself and asserting my boundaries. I had no obligation to fix their mess. I had spent too many years in their shadow, hoping for validation, hoping for respect that never came. I had worked too hard for too long to allow them to once again treat me like an afterthought. But there was more to it than that. Something about this email made me realize that I had reached a point of independence that I had never truly acknowledged before. I wasn't just running a business. I wasn't just making money. I had created something that was mine, entirely mine. I had built this empire, and I had done it without them. I wasn't bound by their expectations, and I wasn't defined by their treatment of me. A few days later, I was walking through the warehouse when Eleanor caught up with me. She had a big smile on her face, one of those smiles that told you something exciting was coming. "Clara," she said, her voice full of energy, "you're not going to believe it. Home Depot reached out. They want to do a nationwide campaign with us, highlighting our sustainable practices." It felt like the universe had been listening. Here I was, only a few years removed from being homeless, and now Home Depot, the largest home improvement retailer in the country, was reaching out to us. It was proof that what I had built was legitimate, that Green Haven wasn't just a business, but a movement. A movement that was changing the way people thought about sustainability, about waste, about what it meant to rebuild and reclaim. "Are you sure this is real?" I asked, feeling the disbelief creep in. Eleanor laughed. "Oh, it's real, all right. They're serious. This could take Green Haven to the next level. National recognition, major partnerships. It's huge." As we discussed the details, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. This was it. This was the culmination of everything I had worked for, the moment that would cement Green Haven's place in the business world. And here I was, standing in the same warehouse where it all began, looking at the plants that had started it all. In that moment, I realized just how much I had grown. Not just as a businesswoman, but as a person. The world I had built wasn't just successful, it was purposeful. It was the kind of success that came from turning mistakes into opportunities, from finding value in what others discarded. And as I looked out at the thriving plants in front of me, I realized that this wasn't just about business anymore. This was about creating something bigger than myself, something that could continue long after I was gone. I couldn't help but smile, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace. The journey wasn't over. There was still so much left to do, so many lives left to impact. But I had finally reached the place I had always dreamed of, where I could walk into a room with my head held high and know that no one could ever make me feel small again. "Let's do it," I said to Eleanor with a grin that told her everything she needed to know. And so the next chapter of Green Haven began. It wasn't just about plants anymore. It was about making a statement: no one can ever discard you unless you let them. And I wasn't about to let anyone do that again. The next few months were a whirlwind of new opportunities and excitement. Home Depot had agreed to feature Green Haven in a nationwide sustainability campaign, and the media attention was overwhelming. For someone who had once been thrown out like garbage, it was a surreal experience to suddenly be sought after by some of the biggest names in retail. But as exciting as all this was, I couldn't forget the years I had spent fighting for this moment. The long nights, the isolation, the uncertainty of whether I would ever get to a place where I felt like I truly belonged. In the midst of all this, I found myself reflecting on everything that had led me here. I still thought about James and Jessica, although less frequently now. I had given them the closure I needed, and they had gotten the message loud and clear. I didn't need them. It was a hard truth to face, but I realized that the moment I stopped hoping for their approval was the moment I truly began to flourish. Even with the success and recognition, there were moments of doubt. There were days when the weight of everything I had built would feel too much to bear. Running Green Haven was no longer just a passion project. It was a full-blown business with employees, franchisees, and an ever-expanding customer base. I was no longer a woman working out of a tiny studio apartment nursing plants back to life. I was a businesswoman, and I couldn't afford to lose sight of my role as a leader. But as much as I struggled with the pressure, I knew that I was finally in control of my destiny. My past no longer defined me. My worth was no longer tied to the approval of anyone else. And for the first time, I realized that all my hard work had paid off, not just in terms of money or accolades, but in the peace I had found within myself. One afternoon, as I was reviewing a contract with a new supplier, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered it anyway. The voice on the other end was familiar, and for a moment, I was taken aback. It was James. "Maggie," he said, his voice hesitant. "It's been a while." "How have you been?" I didn't know what to say at first. Part of me wanted to hang up. Part of me wanted to scream. But instead, I took a deep breath. I wasn't the broken woman I used to be. I had nothing to prove, and I wasn't going to let him have the power to make me feel small again. "I've been good, James," I said, my voice steady. "Better than I've been in years, actually." There was a long pause before he spoke again. "I know I don't have the right to ask for anything after everything that happened, but I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about what happened, about how I treated you. I made a huge mistake, and I'm sorry. I've been dealing with a lot, and I didn't know how to fix it. It's funny how life can surprise you. One minute you're navigating the roller coaster of your own success, and the next, a simple message can stop you in your tracks. That's exactly what happened a few weeks after our international expansion meetings with investors. I was sitting in my office casually scrolling through emails when I received one from an unfamiliar name. The subject line simply read, "A message from an old friend." At first, I hesitated. Who could this be? And why was it so cryptic? I clicked on the message, and as soon as I read the first few lines, I felt my heart skip a beat. It was from Nathan, the man I'd once thought I'd never hear from again. The last time we spoke was years ago, before I even began my journey with Green Haven. He had been the one who had walked out on me, the one who left me behind when I needed him most. After everything I had been through, the last person I ever expected to reach out was him. "Maggie, I know this is the last thing you want to hear from me, but I've been thinking about everything that happened. I'm so sorry for how I treated you. I made terrible choices back then, and I've regretted them every single day since. I've tried to move on, but I can't shake the fact that I left you alone when you needed me the most. Please know that I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry." I read the email again, my mind racing. Was this real? Or was I just getting lost in the past? Nathan's words were sincere, but they didn't carry the weight they once would have. I had moved on. He was a chapter in my life that I had long since closed. But still, there was something about his apology that made me pause. Was I supposed to forgive him now? Should I even care? I sat back in my chair, looking out over the sprawling estate that I had worked so hard to build. Green Haven was thriving. I had everything I needed. More importantly, I had earned my own independence and built a life that was beyond anything I had imagined. I wasn't that same woman anymore, the one who was desperate for someone else's validation. I didn't need Nathan's apology to move forward. I had already moved forward. But I wasn't going to ignore what this moment meant. This wasn't just about Nathan or me anymore. It was about what I had learned along the way. I had fought for my own happiness. I had built something from nothing. And now, I was the person who decided what was worth my energy. I wrote back to him, taking my time with every word. Thank you for reaching out. Your apology is acknowledged. But I don't need it to move on. I've spent years rebuilding my life without you, and I'm proud of who I've become. I hope you found peace as I have, but I think it's time we both accept that our paths no longer need to cross. There was no bitterness in my words, just a quiet acceptance. It was the closure I had never realized I needed. Once I hit send, I exhaled, feeling lighter than I had in years. It wasn't about getting revenge or making him suffer. It was about taking control of my own life, and that meant letting go of the past of everyone who had doubted me, discarded me, or mistreated me. A few days later, I received an email from Sarah. Her message was filled with enthusiasm as usual, but this time, it came with a bit of unexpected news. Green Haven had officially been invited to speak at an international sustainability summit in Paris. The thought of traveling abroad, of showcasing everything we had worked so hard to build, filled me with a sense of pride that I hadn't experienced before. It wasn't just the business success, it was the knowledge that we had something real to share with the world. Our work was making an impact, and now we had the chance to take that impact global. Sarah and I spent the next few weeks preparing. I wanted this presentation to reflect not just the numbers or the profits, but the heart of Green Haven, the people we had helped, the relationships we had built, and the change we were making in the world. After all, we weren't just in the business of plants, we were in the business of transformation. Transforming discarded things into valuable assets. Transforming people's perspectives on what was possible. The day of the summit arrived, and there I was standing in front of an audience of leaders, entrepreneurs, and visionaries from all over the world. For a moment, I stood at the podium looking out over the crowd, and I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just another business pitch. This was my story. This was a testament to everything I had overcome to get to this point. When I began speaking, I didn't just talk about the business. I talked about the journey. I shared the story of how I had been discarded by my own son, how I had rebuilt my life from nothing, and how Green Haven had grown from a small garden center into a movement. I shared the lessons I had learned about resilience, about never giving up on yourself, even when everyone else does. The audience was rapt, hanging on to every word. I realized then that the story I had lived wasn't just mine, it was a story that people everywhere could relate to. Everyone had been through something difficult. Everyone had been knocked down. But it wasn't about how many times you fell. It was about how many times you got back up. After the presentation, I received dozens of congratulations. People wanted to partner with Green Haven. Investors were eager to work with us. It was all so overwhelming, yet it felt so incredibly right. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the recognition of my hard work, my resilience, and the impact Green Haven had made on the world. Later that evening, Sarah and I sat down to dinner in one of the most beautiful restaurants in Paris. As we clinked glasses in celebration, I couldn't help but smile. I had come so far from that broken woman who had been thrown out of her son's house. As the sun set over the Parisian skyline, I realized that the life I had created was everything I had dreamed of and more. It wasn't just about success. It was about creating something meaningful, something that had changed my life and the lives of so many others. And as I looked out at the shimmering city lights, I knew that this was only the beginning. Green Haven was on its way to changing the world, and I was just getting started. Paris was everything I had imagined, and more elegant, bustling, full of life and history. But the glamour of the city, the international recognition, and the success of Green Haven weren't what held my attention. As I stood on the balcony of the hotel overlooking the Seine, I realized that the true measure of my success wasn't the stage or the applause. It was in the quiet moments, the moments where I could reflect on everything I had overcome to get to this point. The night before our presentation at the summit, Sarah and I walked along the river. The evening air was cool and the lights of the city twinkled like stars above us. We talked about the future, about the expansion into new countries, and the partnerships that were coming in. But even amidst all the excitement, I couldn't shake the feeling that something more important had changed. Back in my room later that night, I went over the speech I had given one last time, but it wasn't the words that stood out to me. It was the underlying truth that had shaped everything I had accomplished. This journey, this wild ride, wasn't just about building a business. It was about reclaiming myself. As I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I reflected on the people I had met and the impact I had made. I thought about the calls I received daily from women and sometimes men sharing their stories with me. They were people who had also been discarded, overlooked, or underestimated. They saw something in Green Haven that was more than just plants. They saw hope, a reminder that no one is ever truly lost if you're willing to put in the work to revive it. And that's when I realized the true impact of Green Haven. It wasn't just about turning dead plants into thriving ones. It was about turning lives around. It was about showing people that their worth wasn't determined by what others thought of them. It was about proving that even in the darkest moments, there's always potential waiting to be tapped. The next day at the summit, I was approached by several large companies, each wanting to invest in Green Haven or replicate our business model in other parts of the world. It was a whirlwind of offers, opportunities, and questions, but as the day came to a close, I felt a quiet satisfaction. We had made it. Green Haven was more than just a business. It was a movement, one that was helping to change the way people viewed sustainability, waste, and the potential in things that others had discarded. But as I boarded the plane back to the US a few days later, I realized that the journey had only just begun. There were still mountains to climb, challenges to face, and dreams to chase. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of excitement rather than fear. Back home in the US, things were changing at Green Haven. We were expanding rapidly, but I remained focused on what had always been the core of the business: sustainability, community, and transformation. We had grown so much, but it was important to me that we didn't lose sight of the principles that had made us successful in the first place. It wasn't just about profit. It was about impact. It was about showing the world that change is possible, even in the most unlikely of circumstances. My journey had taught me that sometimes the best thing you can do is simply take the first step, even when you don't know where the path will lead. And so we kept going. We continued to grow, to evolve, and to inspire. I kept taking meetings, signing contracts, and pushing forward. But more than anything, I kept reminding myself of the most important lesson I'd learned: never let anyone else define your worth. As we reached new heights, I made it a point to stay grounded. I spent time with my team, making sure they knew how much they meant to me. I spent time with Sarah, who had been with me since the very beginning. I spent time nurturing the relationships that had helped me get to this point. And through it all, I continued to remember the first day I stood in front of that tiny garden center, looking at those dead plants. Back then, I had no idea how to revive them. But now, I understood. The work wasn't just about saving plants. It was about saving people. It was about helping them see their potential, even when they felt like they had nothing left to give. The day I received a letter from the United Nations asking us to participate in a global environmental summit, I knew that Green Haven had become more than just a company. It had become a symbol of resilience, of growth, and of the power of never giving up no matter how many times you've been knocked down. And so I stood at the podium once again, this time on an even bigger stage than I had ever dreamed of. The world was listening, and I was ready to show them exactly what we had built. But the truth was, I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing this for me, for the woman who had once been homeless, who had once been discarded, for the woman who had learned that no matter how many times you fall, you can always rise again. And as the lights dimmed and the applause began, I couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning. The best was yet to come. As I stood in front of the crowd at the United Nations Environmental Summit, I realized that the journey I had undertaken was never just about Green Haven, about plants, or about business. It had been about me, about my resilience, my self-discovery, and my belief that anything is possible if you have the courage to begin. The applause echoed around the room, but I could hardly hear it. Instead, I thought about the first time I had walked away from my son's house, the day he had locked me out thinking that I was nothing but a burden. I thought about the tears I had shed the night spent wondering where I would go, or how I would survive. That Maggie, the broken woman who once felt lost and discarded, would have never believed that she would one day stand here with the world at her feet. But here I was, and I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. As I finished my speech, I walked off the stage with a feeling of immense pride. I wasn't just proud of the company I had built or the awards we had received. I was proud of the woman I had become, the woman who had refused to stay down, who had rebuilt herself from the ground up, and who had turned a painful experience into something that helped not just herself, but others along the way. The rest of the summit was a blur of meetings, handshakes, and business opportunities. But what mattered most to me wasn't the partnerships or the accolades. It was the fact that I had remained true to myself. I had built something that wasn't just about profit, but about purpose. It was about transformation, not just for the plants we rehabilitated, but for the people who came to us looking for a second chance. I came back to Millbrook Heights, to the life I had built with my own hands, and I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. The mansion that once seemed like a distant dream was now my home. The money that had once seemed impossible to attain was now a tool I could use to make real change in the world. And my relationships, although complicated, were better than they had ever been. Emma and Tony, my grandchildren, were a constant source of joy, and as they grew older, they became more and more a part of my life. Green Haven continued to grow, and the lessons we had learned from transforming discarded plants into thriving businesses extended into every aspect of the company. We expanded into new countries, new continents, and the company became a global leader in sustainability. But as the years passed, I knew that my work wasn't just about changing the world anymore. It was about showing people what's possible. I had seen firsthand that when you take something others deem worthless and give it the right care and attention, it can bloom into something beautiful. And the same goes for people. Over time, I started mentoring young women, sharing my story and my experiences with them. I wanted them to know that no matter how many times they fell, they had the power to rise again. The world might not always treat you the way you deserve, but that doesn't mean you're any less worthy of success. The world may try to knock you down, but only you have the power to decide if you stay down. And every day I made it a point to remind myself of that. The life I had now was a testament to that very truth. My success wasn't defined by the people who had walked away from me, but by the choices I made in the face of adversity. I had decided to keep going, to keep fighting, and to never let anyone define my worth again. And that's why every time I looked at my beautiful mansion or walked through the halls of Green Haven, I felt something deep inside me, something more precious than money or accolades. I felt pride. I felt peace. And most of all, I felt freedom. I had found my place in the world, and it wasn't in the shadow of anyone else's expectations. It was mine. And nothing, or no one, could ever take that away from me. Thank you for taking this journey with me. The best revenge isn't getting back at the people who wronged you. It's living a life that's better than they ever thought possible. And I have to say, I'm living it. Good night. Thank you for watching. His words, though apologetic, didn't have the impact I thought they would. There was no rush of vindication, no wave of relief. There was only a quiet acceptance that I had already moved on. James, it's nice that you're sorry, but honestly, I don't need an apology from you. I'm doing just fine without it, I said. You're not the one I'm trying to prove anything to anymore. I'm proving it to myself. There was silence on the other end, and I knew I had made my point. I just wanted you to know that I regret what happened, James said quietly. I've been trying to fix things with everyone, but it's hard. I didn't know how to respond to that. For years, I had begged for his approval, for his love, for his respect. But that part of me was gone now. I didn't need him to fix anything for me. I had fixed myself. You'll have to fix things with yourself first, I said. I'm not your project to fix anymore. You have to take responsibility for what you did, just like I had to take responsibility for myself. We said our goodbyes, but there was no grand resolution, no tearful reunion. I hung up the phone, not feeling any anger or sadness, but rather a strange sense of finality. The chapter of my life with James and Jessica had come to a close, and I was content with that. Over the following weeks, I continued to immerse myself in growing Green Haven and exploring new avenues for expansion. I took on more consulting projects, working with small businesses to help them find sustainable solutions. I was also approached by several investors who were eager to fund Green Haven's expansion into other countries. The world was opening up, and for the first time, I truly felt like anything was possible. But despite all the new business ventures, what truly brought me joy was watching Green Haven grow into something that went beyond just profit. We were creating something meaningful, something that people could connect to, that could make a real difference in the world. Our commitment to sustainability and community had earned us a loyal following, and the connections we made weren't just business transactions. They were partnerships that would last. One day, as I sat in my office looking at the contracts for new international expansions, I received a message from Sarah, one of my longest-running employees. She had sent me a photo of a new greenhouse they were building at one of our newest locations. The greenhouse was filled with thriving plants, carefully tended to and nurtured, just like Green Haven itself. In that moment, I realized that Green Haven wasn't just my success, it was the success of everyone who had been part of this journey. It was a testament to the power of persistence, of believing in yourself when no one else did, and of turning adversity into opportunity. But the best part, it was still just beginning. And as I looked at the photo Sarah had sent, I thought back to all the moments that had led me here, the sleepless nights, the broken dreams, the moments of doubt. And yet, I wouldn't trade any of it for the peace I had now. The peace that came from knowing that no matter what happened, I had built something of my own. Something real. Something that could stand the test of time. I leaned back in my chair, smiling to myself. There were still challenges ahead. There would always be challenges. But for the first time, I knew that I could handle whatever came next. Because I had already faced the hardest part, believing in myself. And if I could do that, there was nothing I couldn't achieve.